going on? What is this British obsession with American politics at the moment? I mean, it's hard not to be, isn't it? For all sorts of different reasons. I mean, just the tone and the content and I guess the seriousness of this election, the consequences of this election that reach far beyond America. They always do. I mean, they always do. Let's make no mistake about it. The President of the United States of America is almost as powerful a man here in this country as he is in his own. Never more so than now, globally. So, we'll make no apologies for it, to be honest with you. After 6, though, Johnny Burrow will join us. He'll whip us through the Sundays and the bits and bobs on his mind this morning. And also we'll talk a little bit more about Remembrance Sunday, which is, of course, being marked today. 2-minute silence at 11 o'clock this morning. Kevin O'Sullivan will be here. And we'll be doing plenty on that, no doubt. We're going to speak to a Falklands veteran, Smokey Cole, which is isn't that just a brilliant name? And doesn't he just sound like a Falklands veteran? If you had to name a Falklands veteran character, you would call him Smokey Cole. We'll speak to him after 6:30 this morning. He's also heavily involved in a charity about I guess sort of helps. I mean, to summarise it helps veterans when they get back, effectively, and it's a part of the process of being in the military that perhaps doesn't really get the attention that it deserves, I guess. You know, we talk a lot, don't we, about the sacrifices that our military make when they are out in combat or they're at war or they are serving. Perhaps too little, frankly, about what happens when they get back. That really difficult transition to being a civilian, to civilian life. So we'll talk to Smokey about that after 6:30 this morning, and I'm going to be trailing that plenty before now and 6:30 because I just love saying Smokey Cole. Brilliant name. Okay, for the final time, maybe, probably not, let's do this.
Road to the White House with Darryl Morris on Weekend Early Breakfast on Talk Radio. It's a ridiculous show. These people aren't even real. They're just algorithms.
Very good. Very, very good. Thank you, Mr. President. And probably quite fitting for his current mood as well, I would have thought, to be honest. Confirmed in the last 12 hours or so that Joe Biden is the 46th president-elect of the United States of America. For the last couple of weeks, we've been charting the ups and downs of what has been a fraught and tense election campaign, no question. Edward Hardy from the Hardy Report joins us now, and Greg Swenson from Republicans Overseas for our weekly rendezvous. Chaps, hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, guys.
Thank you for being with us on this pivotal moment, this pivotal weekend, this pivotal moment of history, really. Listen, we've got a lot to chew through and a lot to get into in the next 40 minutes or so, and lots to consider. Greg, I want to start with you, and I want to start with this point because Joe Biden is now the 46th president-elect of the United States of America, and we were wondering just how successful a candidate he would be, whether he was the right person. We were also, over the last couple of days or so, considering just how incredibly close this election was. And then when you sort of take a breath and you take a step back, Greg, he built the Blue Wall Coalition back. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Wisconsin will go to a recount, but that's unlikely to change much, I would have thought. He's won some Republican strongholds like Arizona, made inroads in Texas. Georgia would be a huge victory if that comes through after the recount as well. We know now that he has won the popular vote by a large margin. He's received the most votes of any presidential candidate in history. It feels like we have crawled to the end of a super tight race here, Greg, but in reality, this is a very convincing victory for Joe Biden and a resounding defeat for Donald Trump, is it not?
Well, there's a few questions in there, Kevin. Anyway, let me try to hit them all. Was he the right candidate? The answer is no, but it doesn't matter because this was a referendum on Trump, obviously, and so the fact that anybody could have run as the anti-Trump and Orange Man bad and COVID bad, right? So. It doesn't matter whether it was Biden or anyone else. Look, I've said this a few times. He came in 4th in Iowa. He came in 5th in New Hampshire. He has really no accomplishments to point to in his 47 years. He's the Obama candidate part 2 without the charm, without the skills, without the talent, the political talent. And he's been on the wrong side of every major foreign policy issue. His only legacy is bringing hatred and personal destruction to the Supreme Court process, starting with Robert Bork and made probably more famous with the high-tech lynching of Clarence Thomas. So, that's his legacy. But it didn't matter.
He seems also to have now won more votes than anybody
absolutely.
In the history of America.
Yeah, and I'm getting
system.
to that. And the second highest vote tally in American history is Trump. 2 days ago or whatever it was, yesterday when they called the election. So, the turnout was phenomenal. For the election. That's why Biden had set the record, not because Biden's a passionate or compelling candidate. It's just that a lot of people turned out. So he beat Obama's record from 2008, but so did Trump. So, this was a very, very close election. As far as the blue wall, it's a good point. Biden was able to almost flip Arizona. We don't know that yet, but definitely Wisconsin and Michigan. But again, 2016 was an incredibly close race. This was an incredibly close race. Flipping Michigan and Wisconsin, it's both in both cases. I think I was more surprised with Georgia. I think, because Michigan and Wisconsin were so close the last time, and those were states that typically flip. I mean, they voted for Obama. They voted overwhelmingly for Republicans in the midterms in 2010 and 14. So those are states that seem to flip every election or two, whereas I think Georgia was a little more surprising.
Sure.
The popular vote, that's. I mean, he won by a few million, but again, Trump was set the record as well. A record for Republican, but very close. So, but as far as the blue wall, it was actually a great election for Republicans. And no, the blue wall did not, really happen. And, and it wasn't if you'll look at the congressional seats, the Senate seats, this was more, and, Trump underperformed if you believe, what the actual data.
Okay, sure.
And he really underperformed. The party.
You make a good point about the Senate for sure. Ed, the point that Greg makes there stands, right? I mean, he won 10 million more votes than he did in 2016. He managed to reach out. He lost a bit of ground with blue collar voters, which hit him in some of those blue wall seats. But he ultimately also set his own records. Brought out people, energized people. He did bring out his base. It wasn't a total disaster for Donald Trump, was it?
One area I will agree with Greg on that he said there is this election was a referendum on Trump, and it was a decisive victory for Joe Biden in it. If you'd asked the Democratic Party 6 months ago how would you feel if you won Georgia and Arizona at states that Democrats haven't won in the presidential election in 30 years, they would have been over the moon with the concept of taking those states as well as rebuilding that blue wall. So this is a decisive victory for Joe Biden. It might not have been taking the Senate that Democrats would have wanted to do, but they've got the House, they've got the White House, and they could still get a tie in the Senate, because if Georgia is going blue in the presidential race, and we're seeing how well the Democratic Senate candidates have performed there, it could viably be a tie. And if the Senate is tied, the Democrats have the House and they have the White House.
Sure, yeah.
That is a victory that they will be incredibly happy with.
And there's still a couple of runoffs, isn't there, to get to before we get a result on that at the end of sort of mid-January or so, isn't it? And listen, you're right there, and look, it's going to be very difficult. I think Joe Biden is going to be governing in Trump's America, certainly if the runoffs in the Senate don't go the way that Joe Biden wants them to go. We'll come on to that in more detail in a bit, but it wasn't the blue wave that perhaps we were expecting, or some people were expecting. It wasn't a landslide victory, although perhaps more convincing than the early picture told us.
Well, 306 electoral votes that Joe Biden could theoretically get, the same that Trump got in 2016, and 4 million plus votes in the popular vote than his opponent. I think a lot of people will consider that a landslide victory. To be fair, we can characterize it how we want, but I think that is a decisive landslide victory.
I think we're certainly. I think in terms of making pronouncements like that, we are certainly in the territory of landslide means whatever landslide means to you. It means to Trump what it means to Trump. It means to you, Edward, what it means to you. Listen, one of the things the Democrats have to reckon with here, and we'll come on to what this means for the GOP as well shortly, is, has the left of the party, the Bernie Sanders, the AOCs, those the Elizabeth Warrens to an end to a degree, perhaps been a bit of an Achilles heel for Joe Biden in terms of getting that more decisive victory, winning some of those Senate seats, particularly that he will have wanted to win in order to effect the change that he wants to effect?
So,
Edward, sorry, that was for Edward. Go ahead, Ed.
Okay, go ahead.
When you look at who won in this election, which candidates won, not a single candidate who embraced Medicare for all lost. Not a single one. If you look in the House at the success that was there, it was progressives that were successful. The squad has increased in size. Moderates have lost their seat. So when you look at what was a successful approach, the country supports these progressive policies that Democrats like AOC have been pushing. A Green New Deal, Medicare for all, expanding affordable access to healthcare. That is what people want in America. So it's very easy to blame progressives, as people have done. Like people like John Kasich went on TV to attack the former Ohio governor. But if these people who were moderates like John Kasich were so successful, why did Ohio go to Donald Trump? He didn't deliver Ohio. The people who delivered this success were the hardworking activists who pushed a progressive message. You look at people like Stacey Abrams. Her work is delivering this election for Donald Trump, for Joe Biden, defeating Donald Trump. The work that they are doing there is the progressive work in America. So I think that they are the people that need to be credited with the success here, the activism that they've done.
Okay.
Not
it's an interesting point, particularly Stacey Abrams in Georgia. That is a very a key point and a very interesting point you make, and it does feel slightly odd, doesn't it, to do the post-mortem on the winning party in that kind of way. But that's certainly where the Democrats are for whatever reason. The GOP, Greg, have some very difficult questions to ask themselves as well. Now we are a fork in the road for the Republicans in the United States of America. Trump has got a really big base. There's no doubt about that, but he was defeated. Frankly, without Hillary Clinton on the ticket, it seems that in a referendum on Donald Trump in the United States of America, Trump lost the referendum. Do the GOP and also people like you as well, Greg, do you take a hard break from Trump and Trumpism at this point? How do you wrestle there between Trump being defeated but Trump's base being very strong in the GOP?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I'm sure it'll be much talked about the next few months or years. But look, this turned out to be a referendum for the Democrats. The campaign was a referendum on Trump. Okay, they didn't run on any policy issues. I know Stacey Abrams and the squad are running around talking about their policies. Those were rejected. This was the Republicans ran against wokeism and against the extreme left, and the Democrats ran against Trump. And COVID, I give you that. But they surely didn't run on policy. So Biden was smart. The campaign was smart. He disassociated himself from the very policies that were driving the Democrat platform. And the reason he didn't just outright reject them publicly is he needed that base. He needed the Bernie Sanders people to support him, and many of which abandoned Hillary in 2016. So this was a rejection of wokeism, a rejection of the far left. I disagree with Ed on that. And you'll notice.
But the point that Ed makes there actually is that a lot of those, a lot of those Senate wins and those pickups actually came from, not from moderates, but from those progressives that you said were rejected.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, the pickup in Arizona, Mike Kelly? I'm sorry, the astronaut guy. I forget his name. And then which is the other one? I can't think of a Democrat pickup that was a progressive left. And by the way, no Republican congressman lost his race in 2000. I mean, in this, No sitting Republican. So they picked up 6 seats. So I think, look, I can't think of the case.
So okay, so just to the question then, Greg. What does that mean? What does that mean then for the GOP?
Yeah.
Well,
So it means
what are you wrestling with? Because I know you listen. You're very, very supportive of Trump,
Yeah.
but there are major divides and major splits. I speak to Republicans on this radio station and beyond who I mean, the GOP is incredibly split at the moment, and there are real fractions within the GOP now. People who have rejected Trumpism and Trump. Where does it go?
You might see more people come out that say, "Yeah, this was a mistake. His personality was just too much." But he polled at 90% with Republicans. This was not a split. This is not a 50-50 split. I think the schism in the Democratic Party is probably greater because you have the moderates, the Biden types with the AOC, versus the AOC types. I think that's percentage-wise a greater split. The excitement was surely generated by the Bernie Sanders wing of the party in the primaries. That's why Bernie Sanders was on his way to winning the nomination. So I think for the Democrats, that is a significant split. For the electorate in general, I think wokeism and the far left progressivism
what about the GOP?
So is Trump. Okay, so is Trump. Okay,
so about
the GOP, I think there's definitely a reckoning, and we knew this going in, that the policies of Trump, the successes of Trump, the outcomes of Trump were great, were fantastic, and the voters know that. The personality of Trump was, to many, unpalatable and difficult, and that's why he lost. I mean, I think if with his outcomes and policies, he would have polled at 60. We all know in January.
But so much of Trumpism, though, Greg, is built on that, isn't it? So much of Trumpism is built on Trump's personality, on that sort of very divisive way that he conducts himself and goes about his business. And so if the Republican Party, if the GOP become defined by that, but without Trump at the center of it, kind of pulling it all together, where does that go?
I think the party can hold together. The question is, do they win elections? Like the way that Trump did. It's always going to be, offsetting arguments, right? Do you want the guys that the people that Trump appealed to, that were not Republican voters, that were, came in from the Democrats or had never voted before? He generates excitement. There's no doubt about it. The enthusiasm is meaningful. So the question is, without Trump, do we get as many voters coming out? The answer is, I hope so, because the policies that Trump championed are basically policies that are typically conservative. He didn't come up with anything terribly unique. He came up with a different campaign strategy and a different way to appeal to voters who typically didn't vote. But I think his policies and his successes, by all means, were very consistent with conservative philosophy. There's some exceptions, I'm sure, but generally speaking. So I think, look, if we can capture the enthusiasm somehow, have another candidate that embraces the conservative philosophy, but perhaps without.
Who's that person? Does that person exist? Because I look at Mike Pence and I don't see the same sort of energy attached to somebody like Mike Pence, for example.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I don't think anybody's got the kind of energy that Trump has, and maybe we need to find someone who does. Someone who we don't even know about yet, who's got that charisma that Barack Obama had, or that enthusiasm generation that President Trump had. But look, the short list now: Nikki Haley. I mean, Mike Pence is a class act. He's a good guy, but he's not the most exciting candidate. So I think it would be more Tom Cotton, Nikki Haley, maybe even Mike Pompeo, people who've embraced the conservative movement in the Trump years.
Is there also a risk, Greg, that a lot of Trump's energy is driven by ego and anger? Right, and I think you probably need a bit of both of those things, actually. In politics, you do actually. I think, I would probably argue that Trump has too much of those things, and sure. they're more destructive than they are helpful for both him and the country. But ultimately, those are quite unique. He has them in huge doses, and he is an incredibly unique character with an incredibly unique story. Trump was the perfect storm, wasn't he? Already a celebrity, had these business credentials that he could point to, however flimsy they may have turned out to be. He created a great narrative around that, and he had that. I can't think of any other elected official who could get away with doing what Trump does. because he's Trump,
Yeah.
To his base. I just don't know where that go. How do you replicate that? Where does that go next?
It's a great point. It'd be interesting analysis to figure out how many of those voters voted for Trump because of him, and not his policies, not his successes, but because of the personality, because he generated enthusiasm.
A lot, I would have thought.
There's a big number. I don't know what it is, but it's a big number versus the people that he annoyed so much that they couldn't vote for him in spite of being Republicans, in spite of being conservatives. I don't know what that offset is. And I think if, according to the polling, it wasn't much. I do know a few people.
Well, it's about 70 million to 74 million, I think.
Well, no, I meant with among, look, let's face it, of the 70 million that voted for Biden, 68 were going to vote Democrat anyway. And same thing with, that's how elections work, right? So you can't say that Biden inspired 70 million people to get out and vote. But the question is, how many do you lose? How many do you lose because of Trump's personality?
Okay, go on.
How much do you gain?
To be fair, Joe Biden did inspire a fair amount of Republicans because before we don't know how much the number had increased. But initially, they were suggesting that 13% of Republicans had turned out and voted for Joe Biden.
Yeah,
so Joe Biden has gone out there and inspired Republicans to support him.
No,
it's not just Democrats that have turned out in greater numbers that weren't voting before.
That might be true, but I think those Republicans were disappointed with Trump's personality. I don't think they'd vote for another Democrat, and I'm not sure that I think they. And I know some of them. I don't know a lot of them, but I know a few who just thought, you know what? If we lose now, that's 4 years of Biden, who doesn't seem like a terribly, harmful extremist that's going to hurt America like the progressives.
Yeah, they're hoping to rebuild, aren't they, and seize back control of the GOP. If you will. What will be very interesting. What will be very interesting is to see if there is a Trump-like figure or Trumpism in some form on the next ticket, whether or not that holds for whether some of those people do make a more substantial break from the party. Listen, guys, hang on. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. We've got one of the really key points here is that Joe Biden will to some extent be governing in Donald Trump's America. There is no question about that. They don't have control of the Senate as it stands, and that swell of support for Donald Trump, it's still there. Like it or loathe it. Good morning, 5:45 on Talk Radio. I'm Darryl Morris. We are on the road to the White House. I was going to say the final episode, but it's more like a season finale, I think. It's the end of season 1, isn't it? I think certainly in anticipation of season 2, which feels like it's just around the corner. Edward Hartley joins us from the Hardy Report. Greg Swenson as well from Republicans Overseas to take stock of this week's results. Okay, listen, Ed. Here's one of the real hard truths that President-elect Joe Biden has to face when the dust settles on the no doubt joy of his victory. He is going to be governing in Trump's America. He doesn't have a majority in the Senate, lost a bit of ground in the House, but they still have a majority there. It's going to be very, very difficult for him to do anything. Does he have to prepare for life as a more of a caretaker president than anything else?
We were talking before the break about how Donald Trump has performed previously in elections and the electoral success he had. When we talk about Trump's America, let's just remember that Donald Trump has never managed to secure a majority in the popular vote. He's never won a
nor
majority
did Bill Clinton.
of Americans.
Nor did Bill Clinton, but he had a hell of a 10-year or 8 years, So,
but he's never managed to get the support of the American people at the polling booths. So it's not really Trump's America. This is Joe Biden's America now. And it's an America that said, we want to unify again. We want to heal. When Joe Biden talked about the fight for the soul of the nation, that's what Americans wanted to hear. And now they have a president-elect and a vice president-elect who in their speeches tonight talked about how important it was to come together. Joe Biden, even in his speech, said about reaching out to Republicans, to Trump voters, Trump supporters, people who still support Donald Trump, and bringing them in and working together now for the good of America. You would never have got that the other way around if Donald Trump had won the election. And we're now seeing how this is what the future is going to look like. Joe Biden recognizes that this is a deeply, deeply divided country. But that's why he's promised to govern for all Americans, not just Democrats.
That's going to be a real uphill battle, though, isn't it? That's not going to be as easy as simply standing up on stage and saying it, is it? I mean, it's a good start, but it's only a start.
Well, the president-elect has a long, long record in his political career of working with Republicans to get his legislation through. When he was in the Senate, he was known for his bipartisan nature. His best friend in the Senate was Senator John McCain, the late senator from Arizona. He was very close to Senator Lindsey Graham. They had a great relationship. In fact, back in 2016, Lindsey Graham talked about how decent, how great a man Joe Biden was. So let's just remember that Joe Biden here, he has a fantastic track record in the past of working with Republicans. So he understands that you can't govern by being a one-party president. You have to govern as an American president.
He's going to need to pull on all of that experience, isn't he? For sure. Listen, Greg, there's a bit of an elephant in the room here, isn't there? And that is that this isn't over so far as Donald Trump is concerned. He's digging in. He's making legal challenges. Look, we need to reason with each other here, and we're all adults, and we need to be honest. As it stands, there is no evidence that has been presented, nothing really of substance, a couple of recounts here and there, and a few accusations of poll watchers not being able to get close enough to the ballots. It doesn't feel substantial enough. It feels flimsy. The legal challenges seem to be wobbling all over the place like a trolley with a broken wheel. This is less of a legitimate challenge and more of a temper tantrum, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know what I don't know. I mean, maybe they have some evidence. Maybe they're coming up with the evidence. I find the lack of evidence argument kind of amusing, given that, the Biden cartel scandal that came out a few weeks ago was actual evidence. There was a computer, there was a hard drive, there was a validation from the CEO of the Chinese company that was looking after the Bidens. So that was real evidence. The media colluded to
Greg, you're not seriously trying to bring back the Hunter Biden.
No. Hey, Ed, let me finish, okay? So, but I'm just talking about the hypocrisy of, there's no evidence. Well, the election was Tuesday, and now we're at Sunday. I would be surprised if there was massive evidence that was in the public forum right now. Again, I'm not arguing that there is, and I'm not sure that it's not a mistake to go through this, but I think that the media obsession with evidence is amusing, given that what I mentioned about the Biden cartel, but also if you look at the Russia collusion hoax, there was no evidence. Adam Schiff knew there was no evidence, and still they ran with it for 2 years, and potentially ruined the midterms.
But we're not talking about those things.
Okay,
we're talking about.
But I think
at the moment, let's just put this into context. Hang on a minute, Greg. One sec. Let's just put this into context because we can talk about
perspective here.
Well, fine, but we can talk about Hunter Biden and Russia collusion. But actually, what we're talking about here is the president of the United States not believing in the democratic process and not calling the president-elect to concede. That's a really big moment. It sets a real big precedent. And it's the sort of thing that you do if there is a real concrete reason for doing it. And at the moment, there isn't. And you can't really just point at something, at the result, and suggest fraud because you don't like it. You do that if you've got evidence of fraud. And at the moment, it seems that there isn't any.
Right. Darryl, you mentioned evidence, and that's why I just wanted to bring some perspective to it, that there isn't necessarily massive evidence immediately. Now, look, this is not precedent. This happened in 2000 with the Florida recount, and Al Gore was more diplomatic about it. There's no doubt that the president makes mistakes.
Well, that was because it's close.
Messaging.
This isn't close. This is not about the election being close as it was in 2000.
We don't know that.
We do know that. We do know that, Greg. We know because.
Look, Darryl.
Hang on, Ed.
Everybody be cool.
Ed,
all right?
Go on, Greg. Yeah, go ahead.
Look, there is no evidence of massive voter fraud that could flip the election. That's why I think it's a bit much to attempt this. If they have the evidence, then great, we'll see it eventually. I don't know that they can demonstrate that right now, but I think you're right. The evidence that they have found, like the tossed military ballots in Lucerne County, or some of the infractions in Philly, that's great, but if it's 9 ballots, not 9,000, it's not going to move the needle. Voter fraud does happen. Mistakes do happen. But the question is was there a mass voter fraud? Right now, I have not seen any evidence of massive voter fraud.
Should he call Joe Biden? Should he call Joe Biden? I mean, there is some suggestion, by the way. I mean, in the last few hours, by the way, we have heard from some sources that Jared Kushner has begun the process of trying to talk the president around into conceding.
I think you'll see that. I think you'll see Jared, Ivanka, maybe some others that say, look, this is something that you can't win. You know, you might be right. If you look at what happened in Michigan, there is it is kind of fishy. You know, I can't prove it, but to get 100% voter participation, or almost 100% voter participation rate, and 100% of the votes in that district in Wayne County. I mean, this is not a county known for its civic participation over the last few decades. So
but
to get 100,
there was a lot of on the dead side there, wasn't there? And that's the reason why I think that happened.
Yeah,
I think we can. These are the things. These individual things we can quantify them and they're loose. I mean, in your mind, look.
I don't know though.
If you were advising him now, though, Greg, I mean, look, there's potentially more harm than good to be done here, isn't there? For the GOP and for Trump and his reputation. If you're advising him, if you were in the room in the White House, would you tap on his shoulder and say, Mr. President, it's time?
Knowing what I know, which I don't know what I don't know. I don't know if there's evidence or what really happened in Michigan and Pennsylvania.
Well, there's no evidence.
With what I know, I would take the. Well, we don't know that.
Well, no, we do. We know there's no evidence.
We do. The Secretary of States have said it, and I think we have to just be serious, reasonable individuals here, and just note that these whipped up conspiracies about voter fraud and these accusations have dangerous consequences. You go to Georgia and you hear from the Fulton election director, Rick Barron. One of his poll workers is now in hiding, has to be in hiding because Republicans whipped up false evidence. They spread a video trying to suggest they were throwing away ballots.
Okay. Listen. We've
got
a minute.
To answer your question, Nixon walked away in 1960. It was probably the right thing to do. I agree with you, Darryl. There's possibly more harm than good.
Sure. Timing is everything, and I've got a minute left.
Yeah.
So timing was everything for Nixon. It's everything for Trump, and it's everything for us this morning. In a word, Greg, or in a couple, what does Trump do next? Does he run again? 2024? Sets up a TV station? No. What's his next move?
Yeah. I think he'll. Yeah, maybe the TV station's probably a likely. Who knows? I surely hope he doesn't run again in 2024, just because he's too old. You know, you want the new generation to come in. You know, you want someone in their 40s. Okay. You know, that look at the great Democratic presidents were, JFK, Obama, and Bill Clinton, all in their 40s.
Okay, maybe some more time on the golf course then. Listen, Ed, what's next for Joe Biden? One-term president? Can we be sure about that? Kamala Harris next? Is that a given?
Joe Biden is focusing on the immediate, and as he's shown, his first and most important priority is tackling coronavirus.
Two terms, yes or no?
Whether he serves 2 terms?
Yeah.
I think it's entirely possible, but I think he ran for the fight for the soul of the nation. He's achieved that. He doesn't need the second term.
Listen, guys, it's been a real pleasure the last few weeks. Thank you so much. Edward Hardy from The Hardy Report, Greg Swenson from Republicans Overseas on the road to the White House. I think we'll be back. Thank you, guys.